The machine roared like a beast on its last breath, its gears grinding to a halt in the dead of night. In the sprawling heart of Apex Manufacturing, a 17-year-old security guard, Jamal Wright, stood alone, his hands steady on a wrench. He wasn't allowed to touch the million-dollar press. He wasn't supposed to know how. Yet, as the CEO watched from the shadows, this teenager was rewriting the rules of the impossible. What if the youngest person in the room held the key to saving a million-dollar machine? Could a 17-year-old security guard outsmart an entire team of elite engineers? Why would a kid with no credentials hide a genius that could change everything? And when his secret unravels, will it shatter the system or rebuild it? Stay with us to uncover a story of hidden talent, betrayal, and a choice that will leave you speechless. What would you do if the world refused to see your worth? Join Unveiled Wealth to dive into this story now. Sophia Reynolds, CEO of Apex Manufacturing, stepped off the service elevator, her coat draped over one arm. Her auburn hair was pulled back, her eyes tired from a board meeting that had dragged past midnight. She wasn't supposed to be here, not at 2 a.m. Not when her team was scrambling to save a contract worth millions. But a nagging instinct had drawn her back, a whisper she couldn't shake. She moved quietly, her boots soft against the Chicago factory's concrete floor. Then she stopped. A figure stood by the hydraulic press, his silhouette small against the machine's bulk. Jamal Wright, the 17-year-old security guard, was no taller than 5'7", his Navy uniform loose on his wiry frame. His flashlight lay discarded, its beam cutting a sharp angle. In his hands was a wrench, moving with precision no teenager should possess. He adjusted a valve, his fingers deft, his brow furrowed in focus. Sophia's breath caught. A security guard, fixing her machine, the one her MIT-trained engineers had called unfixable. She stepped closer, her shadow falling across the press. Jamal froze, his dark eyes meeting hers. No fear, no stammer. Just a quiet evening, Miss Reynolds. The wrench gleamed in his hand, a silent confession. Sophia crossed her arms, her gaze locked on the machine. The press's control panel blinked, its error codes now gone. You fixed it, she said, her voice low, testing. Jamal shrugged, his sneakers scuffing the floor. Just got it running, ma'am. His tone was careful, like someone guarding a secret. She stepped to the panel, her fingers tracing the reset switch. The machine hummed to life, its gears turning smoothly, a sound as clean as a tuned engine. Sophia's pulse quickened. Her lead engineer, Nathan Brooks, had spent 72 hours on this, with nothing but excuses. Yet here was a teenager, barely old enough to drive, making it look effortless. How, she asked, turning to Jamal. Her voice wasn't accusing, but it demanded truth. Jamal hesitated, his eyes flicking to the floor. I've seen machines like this before, he said. Figured out the trick. His words were simple, but Sophia saw the lie in what he didn't say. No one figured out a hydraulic press with a trick. Not without training. Not without years. She studied him. His uniform was clean but worn, the cuffs frayed. His badge hung slightly crooked, his name Jamal Wright etched in small letters. He carried no tools, just the wrench he'd borrowed from a nearby bench. Yet the press was running, its output perfect, as if it had never failed. Stay here, Sophia said, her tone final. She pulled out her phone, dialing Nathan. Get to the factory. She hung up before he could argue. Jamal shifted, his shoulders tensing. I didn't mean to overstep. Ma'am, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. I just saw it was broken. Sophia didn't respond. She walked to the machine, inspecting the valve Jamal had adjusted. The calibration was precise, the kind of work she'd seen from her top engineers on their best days. But Jamal wasn't an engineer. He was a kid, a security guard. And yet, something about his hands, his quiet confidence, told her this wasn't a fluke. By the time Nathan arrived, his tie askew, Sophia was ready. Check the press, she said, pointing. Nathan frowned, glancing at Jamal, who stood silently by the wall. What's he doing here? Nathan asked, his voice sharp. Sophia ignored him. Check it. Nathan ran diagnostics, his eyes widening as the screens glowed green. This is impossible, he muttered. Sophia turned to Jamal, her voice steady. Tell me how you did it. And in that moment, everything changed. The factory floor felt colder now, the hum of the press a steady heartbeat in the silence. Sophia Reynolds stood by the control panel, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on Jamal Wright. The teenager shifted under her gaze, his hands shoved into his uniform pockets. Nathan Brooks, the director of engineering, hovered nearby, his skepticism a tangible weight. Well, Nathan snapped, glancing at Jamal. You heard Mrs. Reynolds. The Rita Receiver Foreign. Explain yourself. Jamal's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. It was the pressure valve, he said, nodding toward the press. It was misaligned. Threw off the whole system. His words were clipped, like he was measuring each one. Sophia tilted her head, catching the faintest tremor in his fingers. Not fear, something else. Restraint. Atrocious restoration. Nathan snorted, folding his arms. Misaligned, we checked that valve a dozen times. You expect us to believe a kid figured it out in 10 minutes? His tone dripped with disdain, the kind reserved for those who didn't belong. Jamal's eyes flicked to the floor, but he didn't answer. Sophia noticed. The way he stood, shoulders squared, but head slightly bowed, spoke of someone used to being dismissed. She stepped closer, her voice softer but firm. Where did you learn this? Jamal. The question hung between them, heavy with expectation. Jamal hesitated, his sneakers scuffing the concrete again. My grandpa, he said finally. He worked with machines, taught me some things. His voice was low, almost reluctant, like he was handing over something fragile. Sophia's brow furrowed. A grandfather one to one. Not a school, not a degree, just a family member and a wrench. Yet the press was running, its output flawless. She glanced at Nathan, whose smirk hadn't faded. Convenient, he muttered. A grandpa who just happened to know industrial hydraulics. Sophia ignored him, her focus on Jamal. His hands were calloused. She noticed, the knuckles scarred. Not the hands of a typical teenager. Hands that had worked, struggled, learned. Show me, she said, pointing to the valve. Jamal blinked, surprised. Ma'am Sophia didn't repeat herself. She stepped back, giving him space. Jamal hesitated, then moved to the press. His movements careful but sure. He pointed to the valve, explaining in a quiet voice. The calibration was off by 2 degrees. It caused a feedback loop in the system. I adjusted it to match the specs. Nathan scoffed, but Sophia watched Jamal's hands. They moved with a rhythm, a familiarity that couldn't be faked. He wasn't guessing. He knew. She felt a spark of curiosity ignite, sharp and insistent. What else can you do, she asked, her voice almost a challenge. Jamal froze, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, she saw something flicker there, pride, maybe, or fear. Then it was gone. Not much, he said, stepping back. Just small fixes. Sophia didn't believe him. Not for a second. She turned to Nathan. Get me the maintenance logs. All of them. Piedmont. Nathan frowned, but her tone left no room for argument. As he walked away, Sophia looked at Jamal, who stood by the press, his hands back in his pockets. He was young, too young, but there was something in his stillness, his quiet defiance, that made her pause. This wasn't just a kid. This was a mystery. By dawn, the factory buzzed with early shift workers, their voices echoing off the steel walls. Sophia sat in her office, a glass-walled perch overlooking the production floor. The maintenance logs were spread across her desk, pages marked with hurried notes. She'd spent hours reviewing them, cross-referencing timestamps, machine IDs, and repair records. One detail stood out, sharp as a blade. The hydraulic press wasn't the first machine Jamal had touched. 3 months ago, a conveyor system had stalled, costing Apex thousands in downtime. The logs credited an anonymous fix during the night shift. 2 weeks later, a cutting laser had misfired, threatening a major order. Again, an unlogged repair had saved the day. Each incident happened on Jamal's shift. Each fix was precise, untraceable, and unsigned. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her coffee cold. A 17-year-old security guard was quietly saving her factory. She pulled up the press's repair data on her laptop. The valve adjustment Jamal had made wasn't just a fix, it was an improvement. He'd recalibrated the system to run 15% more efficiently, a technique she'd only seen in advanced engineering journals. Her engineers hadn't noticed. They'd been too busy arguing over diagnostics to see the machine was now outperforming its specs. Sophia's fingers drummed the desk. She thought of Jamal's hand, scarred and steady, his voice guarded but sure. His excuse, my grandpa taught me, felt like a half-truth, a shield. She opened his employee file, Jamal Wright, 17, hired 6 months ago. Address a low-income block in Englewood. Education high school. Incomplete. No certifications. No prior mechanical experience listed. Yet he'd outdone her best engineers without breaking a sweat. She stood, pacing to the window. Below, the factory floor thrummed. Workers moving like ants around the machines. Jamal was down there, back on patrol, his flashlight bobbing in the distance. He blended in, invisible to the chaos. But Sophia saw him now. Not the guard, the anomaly. She grabbed her phone, texting Nathan. Siren, meet me at the CNC lathe. Bring the team. The lathe, another critical machine, had been glitchy for weeks, threatening a $2 million contract. If Jamal was who she suspected, he'd prove it there. If not, she'd know. By the time she reached the floor, Nathan and 3 senior engineers were waiting. Their expressions a mix of confusion and irritation. What's this about? Nathan asked, his arms crossed. Sophia didn't answer. She scanned the floor, spotting Jamal by a loading dock. Jamal, she called, her voice cutting through the noise. Come here. He approached slowly, his eyes wary. The engineers exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. Sophia pointed to the lathe, its control panel flashing red. This machine's been down for days, she said. Can you fix it? Jamal's face tightened. He glanced at the engineers, then back at her. I'm just a guard, ma'am, he said, his voice low. Sophia stepped closer, her voice quieter but firm. I don't think you are. And in that moment, the air shifted. Something big was coming. The factory's hum faded as Sophia led Jamal away from the CNC lathe, her steps deliberate. The engineer's murmurs followed them, sharp with disbelief. Nathan's voice cut through, loud enough to carry. This is a joke, right? Sophia didn't turn back. She motioned for Jamal to follow her to the executive wing, where glass doors and polished steel replaced the factory's grit. Jamal's sneakers squeaked on the marble floor, his flashlight still clipped to his belt. He looked out of place, a teenager in a world of suits and titles. Sophia's office smelled of cedar and ink, its walls lined with framed patents and industry awards. She gestured to a chair across from her desk, but Jamal hesitated, his hands gripping the backrest. I'm fine standing. Ma'am, he said, his voice steady but guarded. Sophia sat studying him. His uniform was too big, the sleeves swallowing his wrists. Yet his posture, straight, unyielding, spoke of someone who'd faced harder rooms than this. Sit, she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. Jamal complied, his movements slow, like he was bracing for a trap. Sophia leaned forward, her elbows on the desk. You fixed the press, she said. You've been fixing things for months. Furricanipri, Duregan conveyor belts, lasers, all without a word. Why her voice was calm, but her eyes demanded answers. Jamal's fingers twitched, his scarred knuckles catching the light. I saw they were broken, he said. Didn't want anyone to lose their job. His words were simple, but Sophia heard the weight behind them. A kid, worried about workers he barely knew. She leaned back, her chair creaking. You learned this from your grandfather, she asked, testing the story he'd given. Jamal nodded, his eyes on the floor. He was a mechanic, worked in a factory like this one. Taught me after school. His voice softened, a crack in his armor. He said machines don't lie. They just need someone to listen. Sophia's chest tightened. The words felt raw, like a memory he hadn't meant to share. She thought of her own father, an engineer who'd spent nights sketching designs at their kitchen table, listening to machines, listening to truth. She opened a drawer, pulling out the maintenance logs. These fixes, she said, sliding them across the desk. They're yours. I checked the timestamps. Night shifts. Your shifts. Jamal's eyes flicked to the papers, then away. He didn't deny it. Sophia pressed on. The press's valve, you didn't just fix it. You improved it. That's not something you learn from after-school lessons. Jamal shifted, his sneakers scuffing the floor. I paid attention, he said, his voice low. Grandpa's tool, his notebooks. I kept them. Sophia caught the shift in his tone pride, buried under caution. Notebooks sorted for anyone. Tools. A legacy passed down in a crumbling Englewood apartment. She felt a spark, the same one that had driven her to build Apex from nothing. This kid wasn't just talented. He was driven. She stood, pacing to the window. The factory floor sprawled below, its machines alive with purpose. The CNC lathe, still flashing red, mocked her team's failure. She turned back to Jamal, her decision forming. I need that lathe running, she said. Not next week. Today. Can you do it? Jamal's eyes widened, a flicker of panic. Ma'am, I don't. Sophia cut him off, her voice firm but not unkind. Don't tell me you're just a guard. I've seen what you can do. She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. I'm giving you a chance. Take it. Jamal's hands clenched, his breath uneven. For a moment, he looked younger, a 17-year-old carrying a weight too heavy for his years. Then he nodded, a single, sharp motion. Okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia felt the air shift again. This wasn't just a test. It was a turning point. She opened the door, motioning for him to follow. We're doing this now, she said. In front of the team, Jamal's face tightened, but he stood, his shoulders squaring. As they walked back to the factory floor, Sophia's mind raced. She didn't know Jamal's full story. Not yet. But she knew one thing, this kid was about to change everything. The factory floor buzzed with tension as Sophia and Jamal approached the CNC lathe. The machine loomed like a sleeping giant, its control panel a mess of red error codes. Nathan Brooks stood with 3 senior engineers, Lila Chen, Marcus Tate, and Elena Ruiz, their arms crossed. Their faces a mix of curiosity and contempt. Workers nearby slowed their tasks, sensing a spectacle. The air smelled of coolant and steel, thick with anticipation. Sophia stopped by the lathe, her voice cutting through the noise. This machine's been down for 5 days, she said, addressing the engineers. It's costing us a $2 million contract. Jamal's going to fix it. The words landed like a grenade. Nathan's jaw dropped. You're serious, he sputtered. A security guard, kid. Lila smirked, whispering to Marcus, who shook his head. Elena's eyes narrowed, studying Jamal like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Jamal stood slightly behind Sophia, his flashlight still clipped to his belt. His hands were in his pockets, but Sophia saw the tension in his shoulders. He was 17, surrounded by experts twice his age, their degrees framed in offices upstairs. She turned to him, her voice low. Show them, she said. Show me. Jamal hesitated, his eyes flicking to the engineers. Their stares were heavy, judgmental. He stepped forward, his sneakers silent on the concrete. The lathe's control panel glowed red, its error messages cryptic to most. Jamal studied it, his brow furrowing. Nathan scoffed. This is absurd, he said, loud enough for the workers to hear. He's wasting our time. Sophia didn't respond. She watched Jamal. His hands moved to the panel, slow at first, then faster. He opened a side compartment, revealing a tangle of gears and wiring. His fingers traced the components, steady and sure. The engineers leaned in, their smirks fading. Jamal grabbed a torque wrench from a nearby bench, adjusting a gear with a precision that silenced the room. Hold on, Marcus said, stepping closer. What's he doing? Jamal didn't look up. The transmission's off, he said, his voice calm. It's throwing the alignment out of sync. Lila frowned. We checked that, she said. It's not the issue. Jamal kept working, his hands a blur. It's not just the transmission, he said. The servo motor's miscalibrated. Causes a feedback loop. Nathan laughed. But it was forced. Feedback loop, you read that in a manual. Jamal ignored him. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, its pages worn and stained. He flipped it open, scanning handwritten notes. Sophia caught a glimpse diagrams, equations, scrawled in pencil. Not a teenager's doodles. A mechanic's blueprint. Jamal adjusted the servo motor, his movements precise. The lathe's panel flickered, red lights turning amber. The engineers fell silent. Workers gathered, their whispers growing. Jamal stepped back, wiping his hands on his uniform. Try it now, he said, his voice steady. Sophia nodded to Elena, who hesitated before pressing the start button. The lathe roared to life, its gears spinning smoothly, its output perfect. The panel glowed green. The crowd gasped. Nathan's face paled. That's impossible, he muttered. Lila stared at Jamal, her mouth open. Marcus shook his head, stunned. Sophia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the shock. How did you know? She asked. Jamal met her gaze, his eyes steady but wary. My grandpa, he said. He designed that transmission 7 years ago for Apex. The words hit like a thunderbolt. The engineers froze. Sophia's breath caught. Designed it a transmission still used in Apex's top machines. She turned to Nathan, her voice sharp. Is that true? Nathan stammered, his confidence crumbling. I'd have to check the records. Sophia's eyes narrowed. She didn't need records. She saw the truth in Jamal's hands, his notebook, his unshakable calm. This wasn't just a fix. This was a revelation. The factory's clamor softened as Sophia's gaze lingered on Jamal. The CNC lathe hummed behind him, its green lights a testament to his skill. The crowd dispersed, workers returning to their stations. But the engineers remained, their silence heavy. Jamal stood still, his notebook clutched in one hand, its worn edges curling. Sophia's voice broke the quiet, softer now, almost gentle. "Your grandfather," she said. "Tell me about him." Jamal's eyes dropped to the notebook, his fingers tracing its cover. For a moment, he was somewhere else, far from the factory's steel and noise. His voice, when it came, was low, raw. His name was Amos Wright, he said. "He worked here, long time ago." Sophia's brow lifted. "Here at Apex." She leaned against the lathe, her arms crossed, waiting. Jamal's words came slowly, like stones lifted from a riverbed. He spoke of a one-room apartment in Englewood, where the walls leaked in winter and the air smelled of grease and coffee. He was 7, small enough to sit on a stool in his grandfather's makeshift workshop, a corner of their kitchen crowded with tools, gears, and half-built machines. Amos, broad-shouldered and graying, would spread blueprints across the table, his hands scarred like Jamal's would later become. "This," he'd say, tapping a diagram, "is how you make a machine sing." Sophia listened, her chest tightening. She saw at the boy, wide-eyed, soaking in every word. Amos taught Jamal to listen to machines, to hear their groans and whispers. "They tell you what's wrong," he'd say, "if you're patient." By 10, Jamal could strip a gear assembly blindfolded. By 12, he was sketching his own designs, his pencil scratching late into the night. Amos would nod, proud but stern. "You're better than me, kid," he'd say. "Don't waste it." But life in Englewood didn't wait for talent. Jamal's mother worked double shifts at a diner, her hands raw from scrubbing plates. His father was gone, a shadow in old photos. When Amos fell ill, lungs wrecked from years breathing factory fumes, Jamal was 14. The hospital bills piled up, each one a weight on his shoulders. He dropped out of school, taking odd jobs to keep the lights on. Amos fought for 2 years, teaching Jamal between coughs, his voice weaker but his lessons sharp. "Machines don't care who you are," he'd wheeze. "They just need fixing." The day Amos died, Jamal was 16. He sat in their empty apartment, his grandfather's notebook in his lap, its pages filled with designs that had once powered Apex's machines. He wanted to honor Amos, to prove his lessons weren't wasted. But Englewood didn't offer scholarships or apprenticeships. It offered survival. So Jamal took the security job at Apex, the only place hiring a kid with no diploma. He patrolled the factory at night, his flashlight sweeping over machines his grandfather had built. When they broke, he fixed them, not for praise. Not one. For Amos, Jamal's voice trailed off, his eyes distant. The notebook trembled in his hands. Sophia swallowed, her throat tight. She thought of her own climb years fighting to be seen in boardrooms that dismissed her. But she'd had a degree, a chance. Jamal had nothing but a notebook and a wrench, yet he'd carried his grandfather's legacy, silent and unseen, in the factory that had forgotten Amos Wright. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Jamal shrugged, his eyes still on the notebook. "Didn't think they'd listen?" The words hit Sophia like a blow. A kid, invisible because he was young, poor, uncredentialed. She thought of Apex's culture degrees on walls, resumes weighed like gold. Had she built this A system that ignored a genius? Sophia straightened, her resolve hardening. "They'll listen now," she said. Jamal looked up, startled. For the first time, she saw hope in his eyes, fragile but real. But as they turned to leave, Nathan's voice cut through, sharp and cold. "This is getting out of hand. Sophia, the fight was coming." By noon, the factory's conference room was a battleground. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, glinting off the polished table where Sophia sat, her hands folded. Across from her, Nathan Brooks leaned forward, his face flushed. The 3 senior engineers, Lila Chen, Marcus Tate, and Elena Ruiz, flanked him, their expressions a mix of unease and defiance. Jamal stood by the door, his uniform stark against the room's sleek decor. His notebook was tucked into his pocket, his hands clasped behind his back. Nathan's voice was tight, controlled. "Sophia, with all due respect, this is reckless." He gestured toward Jamal. not meeting his eyes. He's a security guard, a teenager. You're putting a $2 million contract in the hands of someone who's never seen a classroom. Lila nodded, her voice sharp. We've got engineers with decades of experience. Letting a kid play mechanic is an insult. Sophia's gaze didn't waver. He fixed the lathe, she said, her tone even. In 10 minutes. Something your team couldn't do in 5 days. Nathan's jaw clenched. A fluke, he said. Or luck. You can't seriously believe he designed anything. His grandfather's story convenient at best. Marcus chimed in, his voice softer but firm. We checked the records. Amos Wright was a low-level mechanic here, not a designer. The kid's exaggerating. Jamal's hands tightened behind his back, but he didn't speak. Sophia noticed her chest tightening. She thought of his notebook, its pages filled with Amos's designs. Exaggerating or erased, she leaned forward, her voice cutting. Then explain the transmission, she said. Jamal knew its specs, its flaws. Because Amos built it. Elna shifted, her eyes flicking to Jamal. Maybe he read the manuals, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. Nathan stood, pacing. This isn't about one fix, he said. It's about trust. Our clients expect professionals, not kids off the street. The words landed like a slap. Jamal's eyes dropped to the floor, his shoulders stiff. Sophia's fingers curled into fists. She saw it now, the bias, woven into Apex's culture. Class would a guard's uniform. They didn't see Jamal. They saw a stereotype. She stood, her voice low but commanding. I'm scheduling a demo, she said. Tomorrow. Jamal will fix the main assembly line. In front of the board, the room froze. Nathan laughed, incredulous. You're betting the company on a teenager. Sophia didn't blink. I'm betting on talent. Lila shook her head. This is career suicide, she muttered. Marcus looked away, uncomfortable. Elena stayed silent, her eyes on Jamal, searching. Sophia turned to Jamal, her voice softer. Can you do it? His eyes met hers, wary but steady. Yes, ma'am, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Nathan scoffed, storming toward the door. You'll regret this, he said, his words a warning. The engineers followed, their footsteps echoing. Jamal remained, his hands still clasped, his face unreadable. Sophia sat, her mind racing. She thought of Amos Wright, forgotten by Apex, of Jamal, dismissed before he'd begun. She'd built this company on innovation, but somewhere along the way, it had grown blind. Not to machines, to people. She looked at Jamal, standing by the door, his youth a stark contrast to the weight he carried. This wasn't just a demo. It was a reckoning. The Apex Manufacturing Assembly Hall buzzed with tension, its high ceiling echoing the murmur of 100 voices. Rows of chairs held board members, engineers, and workers, their eyes fixed on the main assembly line, a sprawling network of conveyors, presses, and robotic arms, silent for days. At its heart stood a massive stamping machine, its control panel flashing red, a $3 million beast threatening Apex's biggest contract. Sophia Reynolds stood at the front, her posture rigid, her auburn hair catching the fluorescent light. Beside her, Jamal Wright, 17 and slight in his oversized security uniform, gripped a wrench, his scarred knuckles pale. The board members whispered, their suits crisp, their skepticism palpable. Nathan Brooks, flanked by engineers Lila Chen, Marcus Tate, and Elena Ruiz, sat in the front row, his arms crossed, his smirk barely concealed. This is a circus, he muttered, loud enough for Sophia to hear. She didn't flinch. Her voice cut through the noise, clear and commanding. We're here to fix the assembly line, she said. Jamal will lead the repair. A ripple of disbelief swept the room. A board member, gray-haired and stern, leaned forward. Mr. Reynolds, this is highly irregular, he said. A teenager, Sophia met his gaze. A teenager who fixed our lathe, she said. In 10 minutes, Nathan scoffed, but the room quieted, eyes shifting to Jamal. He stood still, his flashlight clipped to his belt, his notebook tucked in his pocket. The weight of their stares pressed against him, but his face remained steady, his dark eyes focused. Sophia nodded to Jamal. Begin, she said. He stepped forward, his sneakers silent on the concrete. The stamping machine loomed, its error codes a maze of failure. Workers craned their necks. Board members adjusted their glasses. Engineers leaned in. Jamal opened the control panel, his hands moving with a quiet precision. He traced the wiring, his fingers deft, his brow furrowed. The room watched, breathless. Nathan broke the silence, his voice sharp. "He's out of his depth," he said. "This isn't a toy." Lila nodded, whispering to Marcus. "He'll crash it," she said. Jamal didn't look up. He pulled his notebook from his pocket, its pages worn, and scanned a diagram. Sophia caught a glimpse of Amos Wright's handwriting, equations tight and elegant. Jamal grabbed a torque wrench, adjusting a gear deep in the machine's core. His movements were fluid, like a dancer's, each turn deliberate. Elena, the quietest engineer, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "He's realigning the drive shaft," she murmured. Marcus frowned. "That's not the issue," he said. "We checked, but Jamal kept working, his hands a blur." He opened a side panel, exposing a hydraulic actuator. "It's the pressure," he said, his voice calm but caring. "It's fluctuating. Throws off the sink." Nathan laughed. "Forced. Pressure, you read that somewhere." Jamal ignored him. He adjusted the actuator, his wrench clicking softly. The panel's red lights flickered, then held steady. Amber blinked to green. The machine groaned, a deep, awakening sound. Workers gasped. Board members sat up. Jamal stepped to the control panel, his fingers flying across buttons. "The sequence is off," he said. "I can reset it." He paused and glancing at Sophia. She nodded, her heart pounding. He pressed the start button. The stamping machine roared to life, its arms moving in perfect rhythm, stamping metal with a precision that echoed through the hall. The assembly line hummed, conveyors rolling, robots whirring. The control panel glowed green, every metric optimal. The room erupted in gasps, then applause. Workers stood, cheering. Board members exchanged stunned looks. Sophia's breath caught, a smile breaking through her composure. But Jamal wasn't done. He turned to Sophia, his voice steady. "It's not just fixed," he said. "It's better." He opened his notebook, showing a new diagram. "I changed the actuator's timing. Based on Grandpa's design, it'll run 20% faster now." The words landed like a shockwave. Nathan's smirk vanished. Lila's mouth fell open. Marcus stared, speechless. Elena's eyes widened, a spark of respect. Sophia stepped forward, her voice rising. "You improved it." Jamal nodded, his eyes wary but proud. "Grandpa always said, don't just fix what's broken, make it sing." Sophia's throat tightened. She thought of Amos Wright, his legacy alive in this boy's hands. She turned to the board, her voice firm. "This is Amos Wright's design," she said, "and Jamal's innovation." Nathan stood, his face red. "This is impossible," he sputtered. "He's a kid, he can't." Sophia cut him off, her voice like steel. "He did." She turned to Jamal, who stood by the machine, his wrench still in hand. The crowd's cheers grew louder, workers chanting his name, Jamal. Jamal. Board members nodded, their skepticism crumbling. Elena clapped, her hands steady. Even Marcus joined, slow but sure. Sophia looked at Jamal, seeing not just a guard, but a genius. He'd saved the contract, yes, but more, he'd shattered the room's assumptions. Not with anger, not with pride, but with quiet, undeniable skill. She thought of Apex, its blind spots, its biases. This moment wasn't just a fix, it was a wake-up call. Jamal met her gaze, his eyes bright but guarded. For the first time, he stood taller, the weight of invisibility lifting. The machine sang behind him, a hymn to his grandfather's lessons, to his own courage. Sophia felt it, the shift, the turning of a tide. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The assembly hall's applause faded, leaving a charged silence. The stamping machine hummed behind Jamal Wright, its rhythm a steady pulse in the vast room. Sophia Reynolds stood at the front, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, board members in tailored suits, engineers with crossed arms, workers still standing, their faces alight with awe. Jamal Wen, 17 and slight, clutched his wrench, his security uniform stark against the machine's gleaming steel. His notebook, tucked in his pocket, held the weight of his grandfather's legacy. Sophia's voice broke the quiet, clear and unwavering. "This," she said, gesturing to the machine, "is what happens when we see talent, not titles." The board members shifted, their skepticism softening. Nathan Brooks sat rigid, his face pale, his earlier smirk gone. Lila Chen and Marcus Tate exchanged glances, their defiance crumbling. Elena Ruiz nodded, a quiet respect in her eyes. Sophia turned to Jamal, her voice softer but firm. "You saved this contract," she said. "You saved us." Jamal's eyes widened, his grip on the wrench tightening. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The crowd watched, breathless. Sophia stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You're not a guard anymore," she said. "You're one of us." She reached into her jacket, pulling out a badge, not the worn security tag Jamal wore, but a new one, etched with technical intern Jamal Wright. The room gasped. Jamal stared at the badge, his scarred hands trembling. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low. I'm not." Sophia cut him off, her tone gentle. "You are," she said, "and you belong here." The board member who doubted her, gray-haired and stern, stood. "Mille services." "Reynolds," he said, his voice gruff. "This is unprecedented." Sophia met his gaze. "So is he," she said. The man paused and then nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "Fair enough," he said. The crowd murmured, approval rippling through. Sophia faced the room, her voice rising. "Apex was built on innovation," she said. "But we've forgotten something. People like Jamal, people like his grandfather. Amos Wright built this company, and we ignored them." She paused, her eyes scanning the faces. "Not anymore." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Lila looked down, her hands clasped. Elena's eyes shone, a spark of change. Sophia turned to a projector, clicking a remote. A slide appeared, Wright Future Program. The crowd leaned in. "Starting today," she said, "Apex will train young people from communities like Inglewood. No degrees required, just talent." Workers cheered, their voices echoing. Board members nodded, some clapping. Jamal's eyes widened, his breath uneven. "A program named for his grandfather." She handed Jamal the badge, her voice low. "This is yours," she said. "And so is this." She gestured to a table where a blueprint lay. Amos Wright's transmission design, now framed, credited to him. Jamal's throat worked, his eyes glistening. He took the badge, his fingers tracing his name. The crowd stood, their applause thunderous. Workers shouted his name, "Jamal, Jamal." Even Nathan clapped, slow and reluctant. Sophia stepped back, watching Jamal. He stood taller, the weight of his uniform lifting. She thought of Apex's culture rigid, blind to those without credentials. She'd let it grow that way. But today it changed, not with words, with actions. Jamal's hands, scarred and steady, had forced her to see, to act. She addressed the room, her voice resolute. "Tomorrow we start fresh," she said. "Every worker, every idea matters." The crowd roared, their energy electric. Jamal looked at her, his eyes bright with something new hope, raw and fragile. Sophia nodded, a silent promise. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a new beginning. As the crowd dispersed, Sophia caught Nathan's eye. He looked away, his shoulders slumped. She'd deal with him later. For now, she watched Jamal, who stood by the machine, badge in hand. Workers approached, shaking his hand, their voices warm. A young woman, barely older than Jamal, smiled. "You did it, man," she said. Jamal nodded, his voice soft. "We did." Sophia felt it, the shift, permanent and profound. Apex wasn't just a factory now. It was a place where talent, not titles, would rise. Thanks to a 17-year-old who dared to listen to machines. The Chicago dusk painted the Apex manufacturing factory in shades of amber, its steel walls glowing under the fading light. Inside, the assembly hall was quiet now, the crowd gone. The stamping machines hum a distant pulse. Jamal Wright stood by the machine, his new badge, technical intern. Jamal Wright pinned to his uniform. The weight of it felt strange, unfamiliar, like a dream he hadn't dared to dream. His scarred hands held the framed blueprint of his grandfather's transmission. Amos Wright's name etched in bold. He traced the letters, his throat tight. Sophia Reynolds watched from the hall's edge, her coat draped over one arm. She'd stayed behind, her auburn hair loose now, her eyes soft. The day had changed. Apex changed her. Jamal's triumph wasn't just a fixed machine. It was a mirror, forcing her to see the factory's flaws, its blind spots. She thought of Amos, forgotten, of Jamal, unseen. Never again, she vowed. Not here. A soft step broke her thoughts. A young worker, barely 20, approached Jamal, her overalls smudged with oil. Her name tag read Maya Jones, her braid tucked under a cap. She held something small, wrapped in cloth. "Jamal," she said, her voice shy but steady. He turned, surprised, his notebook still in his pocket. Maya hesitated, then held out the cloth. It's for you." Jamal unwrapped it, his hands careful. A wrench, small and polished, gleamed in the light. Its handle was engraved Jamal Wright for making machines sing. His breath caught, his eyes widening. Maya smiled, nervous. I saw what you did, she said. The lathe went shim. The assembly line. You made me believe I could try. She paused, her voice softer. I'm starting night school. Engineering. Because of you. Jamal stared at the wrench, his fingers tracing the engraving. He thought of Amos, his hands guiding a younger Jamal through gears and bolts. Don't waste it, Amos had said. Now, Maya's words echoed, a new voice carrying the same truth. Jamal's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He didn't need to. Thank you, he said, his voice low, raw. Maya nodded, stepping back, her smile wide. Sophia approached, her boots soft on the concrete. Maya's right, she said, her voice warm. You've changed more than machines today. Jamal looked up, his badge catching the light. I just did what Grandpa taught me, he said. Sophia shook her head, a faint smile breaking through. You did more, she said. You showed us what we'd forgotten. She gestured to the blueprint in his hands. Amos would be proud, she said. Jamal's grip tightened, his shoulders straightening. For the first time, he looked like he believed it. Sophia's gaze softened. Go home, Jamal, she said. Rest. Tomorrow, you start training. He nodded, the wrench in one hand, the blueprint in the other. A legacy carried forward. As Jamal walked toward the exit, his sneakers echoed in the empty hall. Workers nodded as he passed, their eyes warm. Maya watched, her cap now off, her braid free. Sophia stood alone, the factory stretching vast around her. She thought of the Wright Future Program, of kids like Jamal and Maya, waiting for a chance. Apex would be different now. Not perfect, but better. Is Suriname. Outside, Jamal stepped into the dusk, the Chicago skyline sharp against the sky. He tucked the wrench into his pocket, its weight a quiet promise. He thought of Amos, of machines that sang, of a future he could build, one step at a time. The hall's lights dimmed, the machine's hum fading. But something lingered, a spark, kindled by a 17-year-old who dared to be seen. At Unveiled Wealth, we believe talent hides in the quietest places. What would you do to uncover it? Comment below, and let's keep the spark alive.